and we will get started. I'm going to highlight Allison Macklin. She's going to introduce herself and her companions and get us started.
Great. Thank you so much for having us. We're really, really excited to be here with all of you. So much power in this virtual room tonight. So my name's Allison Macklin. I use she, her pronouns. I am the Public Affairs Director with SECUS, Sex Ed for Social Change. And SECUS is an organization we've been around for 61 years now. And really what we do is we fight for advancing sex education. So we do that through policy and advocacy work at both the federal level and the state level. And then I'd like to have my colleagues who are going to be presenting with me, let them introduce themselves. And Nora, I'll toss it over to you.
Great. Thanks, Allison. Hey, everyone. My name is Nora Gelprin. I use she, her pronouns. I'm the Division Director for Sex Education and Training at an organization called Advocates for Youth. So much like SECUS, we work at the national level to help school districts, state departments of education, and individual parents fight for more and better sex education with a youth-led agenda. So I'm really excited to take part in tonight's presentation and to help all of us figure out how we can help more young people get more and better sex education. So let me pass it over to my colleague, Caitlin.
Thank you, Nora. And hi, everyone. Really, really pleased to be here with you tonight. My name's Caitlin Marchesano. I use she, her pronouns. I am coming to you from Brooklyn, New York. I work on the education team at Planned Parenthood Federation of America. I'm sure most of you know what Planned Parenthood does, but something that you might not know about Planned Parenthood is that we are one of the largest leading providers of sex education in communities and online. And my job, I have the great privilege of working with Planned Parenthood sex educators across the country to make sure that they're able to provide the best possible sex ed they can in schools and communities. And I get to work with our incredible partners, including the folks on this call, to think about how to make sex ed accessible and as good as it possibly can be for everyone in this country. And I am very pleased to pass the mic over to my Planned Parenthood colleague, Katie.
Thank you very much. My name is Katie Christensen Minear. My pronouns are she, her, and I am the North Dakota State Director for Planned Parenthood North Central States. What that means is that I get to do some public affairs work and I get to do sex education in the state of North Dakota. And similar to what Caitlin was just saying, and actually, Nora, it's just such a joy and a privilege to get to work in sex education and try to help people get access to the information that they need. And I think that's back to Allison now.
Thank you so much. So as you can see, we have, I don't know, we probably have like 100 years of collective wisdom in the room among the four of us. So hopefully you walk away tonight with some great insights into what the state of sex education currently is across the country, as well as some things that you can do to get active and to help make some positive changes in your areas. So for tonight's presentation, we're going to be, I'm driving the slides. We will have all of us speaking at different points during the presentation. And I also have a little Mentimeter poll for you all. So if you want to grab your cell phones, I've got a QR code that you can scan. You can also just do this online, or you don't have to do it at all. It's just a little trying to make it a little bit more interactive for everyone. Well, we're here because we are all part of the future of sex education, and we call it FOSSE just because we like acronyms and we like to make things, try to make things maybe as easy or hard, depending on your perspective. But the future of sex education was really designed to bring national organizations together to figure out how can we ensure that sex education is institutionalized across the United States. And so Advocates for Youth, Planned Parenthood Federation of America, Answer as well as SECUS are all a part of the future of sex education. And there's a number of different initiatives that we've spearheaded. So one of the probably most well-known initiatives is that we've developed the National Sex Education Standards that were then recently revised that can serve as a baseline for states and school districts to use to figure out what's the best way to give sex education in a scaffolding approach. So I want to talk first a little bit about sex ed in America. And this is a super basic overview, just to make sure that we're all on the same page, little level setting. So when we talk about sex education in America, it's truly a patchwork of laws, and it really depends on your zip code where you live. So some people would say it depends on the state with which you live. And actually, it's even can be different depending on what state you're in. So basically, when we think about education policy writ large, so there's the federal government, right? And the federal government has currently the Board of Education, it's not gone yet. And so Department of Education, excuse me. And so the Department of Education, their job is really to provide some basic governance for states to use. That basic governance, you could think of, I think one of the easiest examples is like desegregation, for example. That was something that the Federal Department of Education said, hey, segregation's bad. We've got the civil rights movement that happened. We passed a number of laws that says we can't do this anymore. And this is how you should desegregate classrooms. This is how you should desegregate public education. So it was really like, okay, here's this, overarching thing of like desegregate your schools. And then it really went down to the states to figure out, okay, how do we do that? What does that look like? So that's why you saw, when you look at history, you see different states able to comply with that in different ways and at different times. So every state has different policies with regard to education, and every state has state standards with education. And those standards are, things that govern, literacy levels. There's what kind of math that different grades have, as well as sex education and health broadly. So those policies and those standards really go hand in hand. Historically, there haven't really been policies around like, you must teach math in school. It wasn't until things started to get a little bit more controversial, and I'll go over that timeline a little bit with you all. But it wasn't until then that we really started to see policies being implemented saying, hey, you need to teach sex education. So there are some states that have comprehensive sex education laws. We look at California and Washington and Oregon. There are some states that don't have laws, but have really strong policies like New York City schools, Chicago public schools. There are some states that have abstinence only laws on the book. So saying you can teach anything but comprehensive sex education. So it really depends on where you live. And for a complete workup of what your state is, you could go to our website at SECUS, and we have a report card that we've done that's analyzed the state policies as well as the standards, the state standards, and kind of how those interplay within your state. But then once the state policy has been made, if there is a state policy, there are some states that don't have a policy at all about sex ed. It's then the district takes that and they figure out how to comply with it. So that's why you might have, and I'm in Denver, so I'm going to use Denver as an example, but Denver public schools can look very different from Cherry Creek public schools. Yeah, you could be across the street from each other, but their policies around sex education look different. It's up to the districts and then even the local schools to choose what type of curriculum they're actually going to be implementing. So some districts, we found this in Virginia, congrats to Loudoun County Schools in Virginia, but there was a big uproar saying, hey, we're not going to change our inclusivity policy in Loudoun County schools, for example, based on the new federal executive orders that have come out. And so that school district was able to create their own policy within their district to help guide how their local schools should work. So it's a very interesting place to be doing policy work and to be pushing for change in this space, because there's a lot of really interesting and confusing moving parts. So I'm just curious to hear from you all, what is being taught in your schools, if you know. And when I say your school, like maybe you don't have someone you know in school. Maybe this is just the school down the street. Maybe this is the school across town, but just curious if you know. So you can you can go to menti.com to and use the code 54103191 to participate in it. You can also just take a picture of this QR code and it should take you to the actual quiz. So I'm gonna just escape from this really quick, go to my Mentimeter, see, oh, there's people participating. This is awesome. Great, great, great. Cool. There's so many people who have no idea. That's totally fine. Yes, there are some people with comprehensive sex education. Woot, woot, we love it. We've got to stay champions and be a part of that. And wow, there are some folks that are also in abstinence only districts. So never fear, we will help you. We've got some tools for you, for all of you, so to make some good changes. All right, and I'm going to pass it over to Nora, who can talk a little bit about what am I even saying when I'm saying comprehensive sex education.
What is sex ed after all? Yeah, there's so much to cover, so I will be really brief so we can keep moving it along. But a lot of people ask me, like, is sex ed just about doing it? Are we just talking about penises and vaginas or like puberty, or what the heck do we really mean? And when we think about the totality of sex ed, it really is K through 12 and everything in between. So we really are talking about bodily autonomy and safety and healthy relationships. And yeah, there's puberty, but there's also about, being assertive and dealing with peer pressure and finding a trusted adult. And these days, more than ever, how can you find reliable information online? Hello, TikTok. So we know that there's lots of really encouraging outcomes when it comes to the research on sex ed over the past 3 decades. So not just sexual health outcomes around like delaying onset of first sexual activity and decrease in partners and increase in sexual use of contraception, which is great, but also it really impacts graduation rates and decreases things around sexual violence and school connectedness. I mean, if you ask me, it creates world peace, but that's just me. So let's go on to the next slide. There's a lot that sex ed can do if we do it right. And a lot of people, if you just read the headlines, would think it's like 50% of people hate sex ed, 50% of people love sex ed. That's actually not true. Most people love sex ed when you actually explain what it really is. So the National PTA, known for a very nonpartisan approach to all of their subjects, did a really big survey of lots of different kinds of parents of all different kinds of persuasions and political ideologies. And you'll see that there's really a range across parents of elementary, middle, and high school kids with lots of different racial and ethnic identities on lots of different topic areas. And even though the lowest percentage is 47%, you'll see the highest percentage goes up all the way to high 80s. And my polling colleagues tell me that anything that's in the 50% range is considered majority. So I'm a teacher and I'm like, I want all 90%. I want an A on everything. But anything above 50% is majority. So like, look at that. We totally rule. Most people want comprehensive sex ed. They want young people to get the knowledge and skills that they need in order to make healthy and informed decisions. So we have the vast majority of people on our side, and it's exciting to know that we've got that vast majority across all grade levels. So then to really echo what Allison said, let's just look at one last slide. really does kind of back up what people were putting in the Mentimeter. We have a mess when it comes to our laws. A lot of people are shocked to find out there is no like common core when it comes to sex ed. We've got standards, but they're just voluntary. You can do them if you want, but there's very few requirements. And so we know that it's really left to states to decide or states not to decide. And it's really a patchwork, as we call it. And so not only school district to school district, but sometimes literally classroom to classroom, teacher to teacher. When I went to school, my PE teacher was so uncomfortable, he skipped over sex ed, and we just learned a lot about drugs. And today in 2025, it has not changed that much. So I will never run out of a job, unfortunately. And that's why we need to keep fighting and keep working on this topic. So I'm going to send it back to Allison, who's going to give us a little history lesson on this very topic.
Awesome, thanks. So, as I mentioned earlier, this hasn't always been a controversial subject. In fact, in the 1930s is when we first saw the U.S. Department of Education issuing, actual items of sex education for schools to be using. I think the interesting thing here is really to point out the 60s, right? That's when the second feminist movement really started. Contraception, the birth control pill became more widely available. We also saw the Civil Rights Act. In the 70s, Roe v. Wade was passed and abortion became safe and legal. We saw in the 70s, women were able to actually get credit cards and to be able to work outside the homes and to earn money. And then in the 80s is when we really started to see a lot of pushback. So it's not that the pushback wasn't there before, because of course it was. There's always been that, small percentage of people who are like, no sex ed is bad, no matter what. But it really got really big in the 80s. So if you're a Gen Xer like me, you remember very clearly the whole hoopla in the 80s about censorship that came out. We had explicit warnings being put on media. We then go into the 90s. We started to see a lot of quote unquote welfare reform, where we started to see a lot of targeting towards specifically unwed mothers was the language that was being used at that time. And then really in 2000, we started to see this abstinence only education popping up and federal funds really starting to go towards these programs. 2010, we had the Teen Pregnancy Prevention Program, which was the first time federal funds were allocated specifically for comprehensive sex education. And then it's just been a little bit of a shit show since then, right? So things have been popping up everywhere. If you're a Gen Xer like me, you have been for this ride, you've been along the road, and probably you had some pretty decent sex education, maybe around HIV prevention specifically because of the HIV epidemic that came forward in the 80s. But it was really from that prevention, probably scare tactics type of framework. So how is sex ed under attack and why? So we have, unfortunately, a Christian fundamentalist, white nationalist movement that has really gained traction, especially in the past 10, 15 years in the United States. This is something that's been going on globally for a long time and has really come home to roost here in America most recently. And so the idea here is really that there is a certain group of people who believe that, there shouldn't be women in the workforce. Maybe they should be traditional wives, trad wives. I'm sure you've heard that term before, that there are specific gender roles that are ascribed and need to be adhered to. Contraception, there's a lot of contraception misinformation out there right now, trying to help people to turn people against using contraception. There's just a lot of propaganda. And in sex education, we're seeing this across all sorts of angles. It's kind of like wherever there's a little, it's like the person with finger in the dam as water comes out, and you're trying to you kind of get a hold of one area, and then water comes out another area. So we've seen this really with censorship. I know that you all are aware of the book bannings that have happened. And I know that some of you have been active in fighting back against those. So book bans are a huge gateway into banning sex education, because what are they really trying to ban? They're trying to ban LGBTQ identities. They're trying to ban quote unquote obscene material. And of course, what they define as obscene is vastly different from what the majority of Americans would define as obscene. And so how this shows up in policy, then, what we've seen is this, especially this past year, but as Katie is going to talk a little bit about, the first state to get one of these laws was the Baby Olivia law. And so Baby Olivia is a video that has been produced by Live Action. And what Live Action is, if you're not familiar with them, they are a known anti-abortion extremist group who uses misinformation and false and like they've been known to like doctor videos and things like that to create a narrative that they want. And so this is their video, Baby Olivia. It's a 3.5 minute video that basically gives misinformation about fetal development. And really is designed to create an emotive reaction to a fetus. And I think what's interesting about this is that since we've called out the Baby Olivia trend, they have since turned their messaging, and they are now using what's called fetal development education. And again, fetal development education is something that exists in the National Sex Education Standards, and is something that we talk about as part of from the reproduction perspective. However, what the goal of this is not around education and information. The goal is really around indoctrination. Because they want us to show these videos to a third grade class, for example. And if we think about third graders, that critical thinking might be a little needs to be developed a little bit more, and there's design. They are more emotional, so there are more emotional little humans walking around. So that's one way. So we've seen a number of those bills pass. I'm going to get into that in a minute. Some other things we've been seeing is success sequencing. So back in the early 2000s, this was a big thing that came up with that welfare reform that I was talking about, that there are certain things that somebody must do to be successful in life. And successful in life means having a job, not having children outside of marriage, that marriage is between a male and a female. And it's like a whole host of like, you do this, then you're going to be okay. Not taking into account any environmental or political sort of situations that somebody might be in. Of course, you may have this in your state, opt-in versus opt-out policies. So opt-in, really what that does is creates, administrative hurdles to reduce access to sex education. Meaning, so they've got to bring home a sheet. You've got to sign this sheet saying, yes, my kiddo can participate in this education. They have to turn that sheet back in, versus just everyone gets this education unless you object to it, and then you can opt out, which is a possibility in any state that you live in. I've already talked about book bans and LGBTQIA plus censorship, so that's pretty clear. And then I think that's just been compounded by the Mahmoud v. Taylor decision that just recently came down for the Supreme Court, which then upholds the fact that parents need to give permission for young people to be able to access certain materials, specifically LGBTQ inclusive materials in their school setting. So we're seeing this, and we've been seeing this type of stuff at the state level for several years now. And unfortunately, we are seeing this at the federal level now through the Project 2025 playbook. So when we look at legislation that's been introduced across the United States, we track a whole bunch. So this isn't just sex ed legislation. These are things that are they interact with sex ed. So, for example, if it's an LGBTQ censorship bill, SECUS tracks that because we know that that is a gateway into banning sex education. Um, and in 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 2025, almost 80% of the laws that we are that 80% of the bills that we tracked, seek to restrict the rights of Americans, especially young people in the education and healthcare system. Um, According to the data from American Civil Liberties Union, ACLU, anti-LGBT legislation has steadily increased over the past few years, with at least 588 anti-LGBTQIA bills being tracked in 2025. That's the most ever. We tracked 162 sex ed specific bills in over 40 states this year. And of those that were introduced, 15 of those have already been enacted. So you can see here, this is showing progressive legislation overall, 220 that have been introduced or pre-filed in 2025 that we were tracking at SECUS. Of those, oh, sorry about that. Of those, 9 have been enacted. And then when we talk about regressive legislation track, we've seen 58 be enacted. So we're not doing super well, but around sex ed, the news is a little bit better. For example, many people probably remember a couple of years ago in Florida with the Don't Say Gay bill that passed. We are now seeing Florida advocates pushing back against these types of bills. And so while they haven't been able to repeal the existing law, they did fight back against all the anti-LGBTQ bills that were on the docket in 2025, and none of those passed. So this is a winnable thing if we get involved. It's really grassroots activism that is really critical to this movement. So whether you're on the opposition side or on our side, I think the main thing to remember is that this is a movement that is happening at school board level and at the state level. It's happening in the communities with which we work and live. So we're going to do a little bit of a deeper dive now into these baby Olivia / fetal development. We've been calling them anti-abortion indoctrination. I don't know, that's kind of a mouthful. I think the challenge here is, again, to Nora's point around what is sex education, it's hard for us to help people understand just exactly how dangerous these are. Because I think when we start to read about like fetal development education, we're like, yeah, okay, like what's wrong with that? But as I mentioned, that's really not the goal here. It's really not about education. It is about indoctrination. So in this past session alone, there were 36 bills introduced about this, so about baby Olivia or fetal development. And that was in 20 states. So almost half of our states had some sort of fetal development baby Olivia bill introduced. Unfortunately, we now have 7 states that have this law in place. Those are North Dakota, Tennessee, Indiana, Iowa, Idaho, what's up with the I states, Arkansas, and Kansas. And so, like I said, this is a video that was created by Live Action. And really, the nonprofit itself, Live Action, has said they exist today to shift the public opinion on the killing of preborn children. That is their mission statement. So that is what they're intended to do. So not only does it have misinformation in it, it is an AI generated video. It talks about at 3 weeks and 1 day, just 22 days after fertilization, Olivia's heartbeat can be detected, which we know from experts that that is actually not a heartbeat, that is embryologists are really clear that the heart doesn't actually fully form until 9 weeks from the last menstrual period. And so what you're hearing at this time is rhythmic contractions of a cardiac tube. But again, that's like super detailed information, right? And so unless you actually have been pregnant yourself or have been involved in a pregnancy, you probably haven't understood that fetal development. And again, teaching that level of minute detail to young people is really inappropriate. So to point out just that this is it's a grossly inappropriate film. So I've got another code up here if you want to take a quick second. We can see, oops, I didn't mean to go forward. I meant to go here to our next. And I'm just curious, how would you feel if you found out your school was showing baby Olivia or that students were only receiving fetal development education? If you want to just drop in a word real quick, that'd be great. Great. Not surprised. Oh, I hate that. But angry, yes, great, and outraged, and good. You should be because A, it's a school. You should be learning facts, and B, ideology doesn't belong in a classroom, regardless of what that ideology is. So thank you for participating in this. So now what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to turn it over to our resident expert on the call, Katie, who's going to talk about her experiences in North Dakota.
Sure, thanks so much. I appreciate that background information there. And then are you sharing the screen so that it looks a little bit bigger? I think right now we're just seeing like there you go. Perfect. Okay. So, like I said before, my name's Katie Christensen Minear, and I am joining you from Fargo, North Dakota, where unfortunately we were the first state to pass this law and have it implemented. Unfortunately, North Dakota tends to be a bit of a testing ground for a lot of anti-abortion laws, but also a lot of just other kind of extreme laws. If you take a look on the right side of the screen here, you can see this was the vote for the Baby Olivia bill that passed. So in the Senate, it passed 37-9, and in the House, 75-16. So we do have a supermajority here, and so I would say a supermajority for anti-abortion for sure, but other topics that I think we probably hold dear to our hearts. So North Dakota can sometimes be a place, a testing ground where people kind of try out these bills for the first time. A couple things that I wanted to point out on this slide here is this was the bill or this is the law that is now in our century code. If you look at this law, nowhere in here does it actually say baby Olivia. So in North Dakota, the tactic that they took and that we see in some of the states is that you have an explanation or a requirement, and then our lawmakers assume that baby Olivia then meets that law. So what they did here is Live Action took their logo off the video and gave it to North Dakota for free. So if the law passed, then schools could have this gift from them for free to show the students. A funny little note is in this bill here, it says a video of 3 minutes. The bill actually said 5 minutes at first, and then someone figured out that baby Olivia is 3.5 minutes. So then they amended the bill to be 3 minutes instead of 5, because otherwise baby Olivia would not have met the criteria. Okay, you can go ahead and go to the next slide. All right, and then go ahead and click 3 times, sorry. I'm just being fancy with there you go. Okay, so who supported the bill? So in all honesty, the bill didn't get a ton of attention when it was going through, probably because, trying to be sneaky, we're that testing ground state. And also our legislators can be pretty harsh towards public education. So it just felt like there were a lot of other priorities at the time, and that this video was not necessarily it. So it didn't get a ton of attention. But if you take a look here, these are 3 of the organizations that testified in support of the bill. We have Concerned Women for America, North Dakota Family Alliance, and North Dakota Right to Life. If you know anything about these particular organizations, they are very much part of a religious Christian movement in terms of trying to influence state and national policy around abortion, around their anti-LGBTQ, around public schools. A lot of these organizations support school vouchers, they support book bans. So I don't necessarily think of these organizations as having the best interests of our students or our public schools in mind. Unfortunately, in North Dakota, they're highly, highly influential. Unfortunately, in North Dakota, a lot of our lawmakers will listen to these organizations over the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists. They'll listen to these organizations over the American Academy of Pediatrics. And I think as parents and as adults, that should really be quite terrifying when we think about who do we want influencing policies and who do we want influencing what happens with their kids. I mean, I'm going to lean into ACOG and the pediatricians over these orgs, but that's just not the reality here in North Dakota. Go ahead and go to the next slide. All right, so in North Dakota, we have the Department of Instruction. We call it DPI. In most states, it's the Department of Education. So where we landed here is this is the actual law, and then the DPI puts out the guidance on it. When the law first came out, baby Olivia was listed as meeting the criteria for the law. Since then, they have actually added some other options. And I think this is important to know that if a law like this does end up in your state, you can at least try to push for an alternative video to be shown instead of having the actual baby Olivia video in your school. So I think that's a little helpful to know. You can, go to the next slide. Okay. So once the law was implemented here, it was really interesting because it kind of hit the schools, and then schools had to decide what were they going to do. And in North Dakota, like I said before, I would say that our state legislative body is not super friendly to public schools. So there was definitely a fear of non-compliance. I think there was this fear that if we didn't do this, that we're somehow the next session going to be published, something else is going to happen to us. So we honestly had some schools that were just showing it so that they could say they were showing it and they would just be done with it, that they just didn't even want to deal with that. What we saw from other schools was actually a lot of confusion about what the law actually wants us to do. So I think Allison talked about this a little bit sooner, but if you look at the law here, it actually says a high definition ultrasound video. And then later in the law, it says a high quality computer generated rendering. Baby Olivia is like a cartoon. It's AI. I mean, it's not a real ultrasound video. Another thing with our law, I highlighted here, it says that the video has to note significant markers in cell growth and organ development for every week of pregnancy until birth. Baby Olivia never talks about lungs. Those seem pretty important to me in the whole fetal development process. Baby Olivia also counts off the weeks, and then it goes from 14 to 18 to 20 to 27 and jumps to 38. But the law says every week of pregnancy. So do you need to literally count every week? So there were concerns that baby Olivia doesn't even actually meet the law, but still schools were like, here, we're just going to show it. It's just 3.5 minutes. Just do it and get it out of the way. So we can just check that box. The other thing that was actually fascinating to me is that a lot of schools already showed a fetal development video. A lot of schools already actually had something in place as part of their curriculum to talk about what happens in pregnancy before baby Olivia ever even showed up. So some schools just kept doing what they were doing and just kept the video that they had. So for some schools, this was just a big nothing burger. They're like, fine, we're doing it. So it was really interesting to see how this kind of played out in real life once we had to deal with it. Okay, next slide. Okay, so a problem then obviously is that this law then became a blueprint for other states. So as we watch this being carried out in other states, we did see that there was even recruitment and training for anti-abortion lawmakers to be familiar with the video and give them strategies and tactics for getting it passed in their state. It's copycat legislation, super easy. If you are an anti-abortion person and you want to get your name on something, this is a piece of cake bill to do that. And honestly, it just really reinforces that anti-abortion sentiment. I mean, look who was supporting this bill in North Dakota. Where we have seen it fail, though, you will see that sometimes even anti-abortion lawmakers will agree that this is overreach, that it's not the role of lawmakers to be telling schools and teachers what they should be doing. There were some concerns about the medical inaccuracy or concerns with the credibility of the organization that created it and should they be in our schools. And then there were some that really felt like it was too much of a partisan issue. So obviously, if this pops up in your state, the number one thing you want to do is try to defeat it at the legislative level so you don't even have to deal with it after that. Lawmakers do not determine what is taught in our schools. Our experts do, and those are our teachers. So trying that message is the message that tends to resonate the most. And some lawmakers, not all of them, care about medical accuracy also. So you can kind of lean into that if that's a value that they carry. We can go to the next one. Okay, now if the bill does get passed, and if you do have to deal with baby Olivia in your school district, I would highly recommend looking, you know what, and even if you don't, I would highly recommend looking into your school district's policies for selecting and challenging materials. Most school districts should, and if they don't, they should have policies that state that our students deserve facts. They deserve accurate concepts. They deserve information presented in an objective manner. So we actually have that in the Fargo Public Schools. Side note, I'm on the school board, so I actually know this content really quite well, but I am wearing my Planned Parenthood hat today. Okay, so we have this in policy that the information presented to our students has to be medically accurate. We also have a process where people can request that materials be reconsidered. So if you go to the next slide, if you take a look on the left, this right here is the Fargo Public Schools request for reconsideration of educational materials. This is page 1. It's like 6 pages long. But basically what people can do is if this video ends up in your school is you can try to request or try to challenge it and say that it doesn't belong there because it's not medically accurate. So we were fortunate here in North Dakota. There was an organization called Prairie Action, and they basically organized parents and groups around this video saying that our students deserve better, that they deserve medically accurate information presented to them. And guess what? Next slide. It worked. So in the public schools, in the Fargo Public Schools, when somebody submits a request for reconsidering materials, there's a committee that comes together. They review all of the information and why the request is being made. And if you go to the next slide, this is a little excerpt from the Fargo Forum from the newspaper on what the committee found. And as a committee, they decided that it contained significant portions of untrue information, inaccurate facts. The company was unable to provide data on the effectiveness of the curriculum source, so they actually even tried to look into the creators of the video. And appeal of interest and needs of students as it is only used in a single course or a single classroom. So it met certain criteria. And I think it says here, interesting, the report said the video does not contain all major organ development. It states that the heartbeat is heard at 3 weeks. And our district also really leaned into the fact that medical experts, including the American Medical Association, find this video to be misleading. And those are the people that we should be looking to when we're determining what type of information our students should be receiving in our school. So I'm quite certain that's my last slide. So thanks for listening to me and hearing our little story in Fargo, and we'll go on to the next person.
Yeah, thanks so much, Katie, and thanks for sharing that that kind of case study, really like trailblazing case study in both like baby Olivia and kind of resistance to it at the local level. And I think it underscores like the importance of local activism when it comes to sex education. And so I won't like get ahead of myself here. Nora shared some data up at the top of our call saying really clearly, like, sex education is popular. Parents really want sex education. And we have been doing polling like this across every kind of demographic, every kind of poll for as long as I have been providing, as long as I've been a sex educator. And every single time we do it, these numbers stay roughly in the same ballpark. We know it among Republicans, among Democrats, rural, urban, like every way you slice it. There might be like a slight difference. It's not big. Like, parents want sex ed for their kids. And this is just another slice of data from polling, that nationally representative polling that we did at PPFA in 2022, that kind of reiterates what Nora shared. And if we go to the next slide, um, also including, like, parents want sex education that covers a variety of topics. This is just a small sampling of the topics that we polled on. And you'll see that, you know, on the left column, elementary school is a little dicey, right? But like, not all of these topics are even taught in the way that we might perceive of them in elementary school, right? But we see things like self-esteem and lots of different things have over majority approval. Hanging on to that over 50, Nora, that feels important. And I want to acknowledge, I think it is, I meant to put a little arrow here, but reproduction, including how pregnancy happens in middle school and high school, there is a lot of support for that. I can also tell you that research came out last year, and I will be sure to include in follow-up materials the link to this, that when people understand how pregnancy happens, they are more likely to support abortion access. And so I think that's a really powerful statement, A, about the power of sex ed, and B, why opposition is trying so desperately to control the narrative in sex ed with this misleading information, right? And so one other thing I wanted to name is that in our polling, we asked parents, what are the most important things to you about sex education? Like, beyond whether or not it's taught, period, beyond the topics, or like, what about sex ed is important to you? And the top 3 things they said very clearly was: 1, it needs to be age and developmentally appropriate. 2, it needs to be comprehensive. 3, it needs to be fact-based. These are the values that parents are looking for in their sex education. And I think Katie really demonstrated so clearly the ways in which baby Olivia fails at all 3 of these things. And I think baby Olivia is one example, and a very popular example right now because of the moment we are in, but one of the types of things we are seeing around how our opposition is coming at and coming after sex education, whether it is banning information on LGBTQ identities, whether it is changing content around, you know, consent. And so it's really important to say, like, we know sex ed is popular. We know across a variety of topics it's popular. And we know that parents value those 3 components of sex education. And so we need to stand in that, knowing that data is on our side. And I'll just go to the next. And so I think, like, zooming out, right? Like, thinking about baby Olivia and sex ed in general. And we have a lot of tools that we will share with you to add to your tool belt around, like, how to talk about, think about, advocate for sex education generally, and specific issues like baby Olivia. But But one of the most important things is storytelling and talking with other parents and peers about why sex ed is important, what you value, finding that common ground around we all want kids to learn what they need to grow up safe, healthy, and confident, and really identifying places where we can agree, right? And so this is just one example of a message frame that we tested with parents to see, what resonates the most with you. What is something that if you heard, you could really get behind? And these messages really resonated with folks. And I think you can take these messages, add your own flavor, add your personal experience. So many of you have shared such compelling stories in this chat tonight about what you've seen and heard and experienced and what people in your life have seen and heard and experienced. And so then if we have, we're not going to have time to watch this video, so I'm going to skip past it. But something that we at Planned Parenthood have been working on is a card deck to encourage parent and child, like parent communication with their kids. Being an askable adult, getting them to open up. It's kind of like table topics, but for sex ed. And this card deck not only gives you some like openers for how to talk to your kid, it also helps you get information from them about like what they are getting in school and what they aren't beyond. And I just had having a kid that just started preschool asking, what did you do today, yields me like nothing. And I realized I have to go back into my toolbox and find different questions. And so this card deck will give you some different questions and help you be a better like listener and also a better advocate. And so that's it for me. I'm going to pass it back to Allison to bring us home.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen again. Sorry. So where do we go from here? I mean, honestly, we've given you a lot of information, but we haven't given you the tools yet. So we've given all of our toolkits that we've come up with. So as SECUS, you can go on there. There's state profiles. You can learn about what's going on in your state specifically. What grade did you get? We have lots of reports. We just had our mid-year report come out. I encourage you to sign up to our listserv for all of our organizations so that you can get news as it's coming out and these tools as they come out. But definitely take a deep dive in everybody's website because these tools exist for you. And I think the biggest thing that we're most proud about is our FOSSI toolkit that we are just launching. And so excited to launch for you all. Because this toolkit is really what is going to help you fight for sex education in your schools. And so we've provided that link, and I think Julie is going to send the resources that we've provided her as well as the recording for the slides out at a later time. So you'll have all of these in your inbox. And I was going to do another Mentimeter, but we're short on time. So don't do that. But Julie, I'll hand it back to you.
Okay, well, ladies, we've got 3 minutes left. One question that somebody did have really quickly when it was Katie was speaking, they asked, how under threat are you personally working in Planned Parenthood in North Dakota?
I mean, honestly, I would say there's always going to be, we're always kind of under the microscope at Planned Parenthood. I think the intensity of it goes up and down with time. But I feel like we also take safety really seriously here. So we have a lot of protocols in place to keep us and our programming and what we do safe. I appreciate the question a lot. It certainly feels very tense and scary at different points in time. But I mean, I think Planned Parenthood has been, I know, in Minnesota for at least 100 years, and the affiliate I work for, and so we're not going anywhere.
So somebody else said kids are seeing porn online as early as second grade. Yikes. Would it be effective to make the case that we need a counterweight in teaching sex ed in school?
I mean, as a sex educator, I would say yes, 100%. I think we need to be doing whatever we can to make sure that our kids are not seeing pornography, you know, for sure. But regardless of that, they're going to hear and they're going to learn things. I mean, whether it's pornography or not, I mean, they're going to learn and they're going to hear things, and we can't ignore this topic. I mean, they deserve accurate information, regardless of the situation. But more often than not, if we are not the ones talking to them and providing them the information, they're going to hear it and learn it somewhere else, or they're going to start making things up in their brains. And that tends to not be very accurate either.
And I think one of the things that people don't know about sex education is that comprehensive sex education includes media literacy. So it helps young people understand what they're seeing online, why it's not, you know, an accurate portrayal, how to find good resources, and so on. And so by not having comprehensive sex education, we're also eliminating that media literacy component, which is so critically important for all young people in this day and age.
Well, we are at 8:29, so I am just want to thank you all for coming and sharing with us again. It's always really super informative when you come and let us know what's going on. We have been placing the information about the resources there on our website, and so that link is there, and some of those. Actually, all of the resources that you mentioned this evening are on there because I went and checked it and double checked. But thank you so much again, because like I said, there's lots of thank yous in the chat. You know, folks really were engaged with the information that you all shared. So, all right.
Thank you
Well,
so
good
much
night,
for having
everyone.
us.